Okay, hi everyone. My name is Izzet Sidki and I am Director of Paris Advanced Research Center. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting our guest, Dr. Izzet Sidki Darendeli, who is an Associated Professor at California State University, East Bay. He is also a founder, innovation consultant, advisor, and investor. During our discussion, we will touch such topics, ChatGPT, open artificial intelligence, startup, and innovation. Well, thank you for accepting our invitation, Dr. Darendeli. I will just start with my first question. Can you tell us about your background and how you got into innovation strategy? What skills are essential for those who are interested in pursuing a career in startup? Can you also share some of your experience and success in the startup and venture capital industries? I ask this question because there are many students in France and Europe. They have heard a lot of things about the questions, but they have really limited knowledge about it. And I was thinking it will be great to ask these questions.
Hi, so thank you for hosting me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here talking with Paris Advanced Research Institute, and hi everyone who is listening to us. It's an interesting question because number one, when I moved here in Silicon Valley back in 2015, I kind of understood that it's really not a blessing, but a curse to be an academic if you want to actually excel in the field of entrepreneurship. So Silicon Valley is mostly fond of founder-driven and success stories. And when you go to an event and when you say, hey, by the way, I'm a professor of entrepreneurship, they take one step back. And then they say, okay, do you know enough about entrepreneurship? So did you actually engage in entrepreneurship while you are teaching entrepreneurship, right? So those were some of the questions that were raised to me by my students and as well as all those founders and investors. So what we do here in mostly, I think there's a little bit, maybe a slight difference between the European system and the non-European system, at least in the business schools, is there is a great pressure on what we call or what Andrew Van Dan calls as engaged scholarship, meaning that you have to be on the field and you have to active to practice and practitioners. And then that should feed in your high quality research, and how your high quality research should also feed in your engagement with the practitioners and what you do on the field. So it's like a cycle, and as a part of it, he argues that we end up better theories, better hypotheses, and better better contribution to academia and practitioner at the same time. So I felt all that pressure when I first moved to Silicon Valley. But luckily, I already was working on a startup idea when I moved here as an assistant professor, actually. And so I had some experience in struggling. I'm not so talking about from success, from failures, right? Near failures, right? And then, so that's the thing. So as a background, back to your question, number one, I was working in many companies or multinationals, multi-million-dollar, some of them billion-dollar multinationals, and then especially in their innovation departments or related to their research and development. But there was always like these deeper questions of what drives innovation, what affects innovation, what curtails innovation, what fosters innovation or entrepreneurship. at the individual level or at the organization level or at the country level, those questions intrigued me a lot. That moved me to move into academia and do a deeper research on those. So that was the first reasons that I wanted to research on, and especially coming from Turkey, which is an emerging country. You are always driven by the question of how do we catch up the advanced countries, emerging countries? What are we doing wrong, right? What can we do right? So all those things were all motivations for me to pursue an academic career. Then I did my PhD on strategy, international business, and innovation, actually. And then I had a chance to work with great advisors. And we have worked on during my PhD thesis, those big questions, and tried to answer a few of them. But going back to your question, so that's how I got involved with the entrepreneurship. So moving, the one of the first reasons that I actually decided to take a job in San Francisco, or we call it the Bay Area, was the fact that I really wanted to be on the field. I wanted to practice entrepreneurship, and I want to also do research on entrepreneurship and innovation. And it's one of the few places that you can do in the world. Paris is one of them, for sure. And so I decided to take that job. And then the story about learning and maybe talking about entrepreneurship, what I have also seen that it's very interesting and different approach, especially in the US. And then some of it comes from regulation in terms of the success and failures of startups and how they are actually being perceived. Here I have seen very successful venture capitalists, so VCs or angel investors, who invest into startups who have failed before. So that was their they were looking for startups or founders who have failed at least once. And in some countries, culturally, it's a big no. And in some countries, from a regulatory perspective, if you have that thing on your maybe record, like if you had a bankruptcy, right? It stays with you, and then it might prevent you to get additional maybe funding or investment or credit in many countries. And then mostly, I think that's kind of the European system. And but here it's the other way around, and they really see failure as a part of greater success. So we know the failure rate of startups are 98%, 94 to 98%. Wow. So actually it's 94%. But during times of crisis in the last few years, we are seeing that the failure rate is increasing. And so it's really high. So how do you decrease that percentage, right? This is what I'm trying to do, looking at from the perspective of research and academia and doing work on the practice in the field. How can we lower that percentage so that the founders do not fail right away, right? So that's, I think failures teach a lot, but that's one thing. But you can also learn from the failures or mistakes of others.
Well, thank you. But if I don't know, how to compare to European system, particularly in France, often I heard from investor or who like to have startup, they have difficulties with bureaucracy. From beginning of opening a bank account to dealing with to registering the company, to recruiting employees, and of course trying to find the fund. So you think one of the strategy, especially your area, many of entrepreneurs choose, like, let's say, Silicon Valley, because it's really everything when you start is easy go up, or just everything is ready? Trying to understand differences from the European perspective.
That's a great question, actually, Izzet Hocam, because that's one thing. It's not the only factor for sure. There are the more important factors that have moved people to Silicon Valley, and then we are seeing that now. We can talk about it even. It seems like it's leveling. People are going out of Silicon Valley, and then we are seeing similar innovation hubs or entrepreneurship hubs all over the world, right? But there is a unique thing that actually, as you said, as you indicated, that keeps attracting founders or innovators to Silicon Valley. Most of it is related to the human capital, talent, but we cannot ignore the fact that we cannot ignore maybe the power of what we would call institutional environment, but in practical terms, almost no bureaucracy and regulations catered around it. So let me give you a real example. One is what you see in many parts of the United States, but actually here in California and Silicon Valley is there's a creative idea. As founder comes up with an idea, right? So regulators might have a question mark whether to regulate it or not, right? So because from the perspective of the society, they have to make sure something new comes up, and then they have to watch out if it causes any harm to the society as well. Again, for example, the example of Uber and Lyft, why those companies, or Airbnb, or why those scooter companies were found first in the US, right? So typical European regulatory reaction, or bureaucracy reaction would be, let's regulate first, then innovate later, right? There, the thinking would be,
that's true.
And then I think it's because of the approach to rule making, regulation making, right, or all institutional development, and then it's being criticized because then you would say that all rule makers or bureaucrats are actually making those decisions from ivory towers, right? That's the disadvantage of it. But on their perspective, they will say, "Oh, we need to be there so that we kind of prevent any kind of harm to the society right away." Right? In the US, I have seen that you can start almost any kind of startup company, and then you might be going into the gray area, meaning that there is no regulation about it, right? When there is no Uber and Lyft, there wasn't any regulation about it. When there are drones, right? When the drone technology came up, regulations are not there. Now we are going to talk about AI today. It's very hard for the regulation or laws to be up to date constantly with the new technologies. What they do is I don't know if they do it consciously, but it's the nature of the things. So here, the regulators, they watch these startups, these companies to work on these. And then until they reach to a certain size, then they start regulating them. So innovate first, regulate later. That's something that I see as one of the main differences between, if you compare those two different locations.
I agree with you totally, because in my experience in France, since I have been living here, I always was thinking how the entrepreneur, especially the startup, could choose country like France and succeeded. Because many times I have seen the huge barrier, not just because thinking about regulation, but within the paperwork. You have many many papers to done before you start. So this really needs time, and sometimes you have to wait a few months to answer from the regulator and the government. And so I think you're right. Yeah, that's now it's much easier for me to understand why people do go to Silicon Valley. So let's go to what you mentioned about ChatGPT. It's very interesting. Some of the universities in Europe has been forbidden for students to use now ChatGPT. I don't
In
know
Europe,
how. Yes,
right?
yeah, and I don't know how in the time of the success to avoid students to not use ChatGPT. Let's go to here because it's very hot topic today talking about ChatGPT. Do you think it's a solution to forbid to use ChatGPT, or ChatGPT will really help our life, particularly students? Let's say when
It's a
we
good
write
question.
an essay or anything about to develop our intellectual area.
It's a great question. So, of course, look, going back to the prior conversation you and I had about regulate first, innovate later, right? So, individuals, decision makers, they want to make decisions about things that they don't really understand well. They are afraid of it. And then this is similar in the academia and university case, right? So in academia, you and I, we publish regularly, and then you and I were seeing that the academic journals, some of them, the first thing they did was, okay, so we're going to restrict this new technology, right away. And we are seeing other academic journals observing and maybe waiting on what to do with this new technology so that they can understand it better. By the way, when I say new technology, I think we should make a clear distinction between the technology and the tool. So the ChatGPT is the tool of all this, what we were calling a regenerative learning technology, AI, that's based on the machine learning, all those research and developments. It's a product of it's a tool actually. So again, for students, what we see is, at least here, is we are seeing it as a complementary tool most of the cases. So many professors are actually telling students to actually use ChatGPT here, or GPT-4 actually, in
Interesting.
computer science, right? And so that they see it as a complementary tool. And so I think, again, this is the approach, and we can delve into that question. Is it a complementary tool? Is it a disruptive tool? Or the AI technology itself, is it complementary or disruptive? We can discuss maybe those.
Yes, that will be great. It is because I have been using a few times, and honestly, I like it because it's sometimes when you try to understand to shape your essay or your paper or whatever, you have an idea, and it's as you say, it's a tool to develop your article or essay. But what we have seen also on social media, it's a growing new technology, such a tools. It's not stop only to use essay or articles, but it's going to further, like in the art area, the graphics, many things. So do you think we are challenging, we are facing a new era that we have seen beginning of 2000 when the Google enter our life? Is it similar, or does really ChatGPT, or let's say all other tools, artificial intelligence will bring a new era to us.
It's going to be require a lot of forecasting, and academics are really bad in forecasting. If we were correct, then we would be really rich in stock market, right?
Yeah.
But what I can say is with these new technologies, you can go, there is two possibilities. One is what we see mostly is with new technologies, most of the time, the first products or the first solutions, the first startups, the first companies that are working on a new emerging technology will fail. We call it the hype cycle, right? So there's going to be a hype about it. People will get excited about it. There will be a lot of hype, and then it will create even more hype, right? And since the products out there are not perfect, or not, they are not focusing on the right problems, or the customers are not ready to use those tools, or it's not convenient for, so because of many reasons, we see a first wave of those solutions failing. And we have seen this a lot in the blockchain technology. There was a lot of hype, and the first solutions have failed. We have seen this with wearable technologies, right? IoT wearable. We have seen this hype a lot about 5G, and lastly about metaverse, right? Even Meta considered last week that it's going to take years for the metaverse to actually settle in people's daily lives, but they were talking about completely different. They were talking about it completely differently 1 year ago, right? So
that's true.
There is one possibility, but when you ask me that is it similar to 2000s in Google, right? And then I have seen many people, many important experts are getting excited about this new, what we call regenerative intelligence, and the ChatGPT and GPT-4 getting excited about it, similar to their resembling into the 2000s Google, or the 1980s first GPUs came out, some kind of a revolution, right? And so there's two different views. So one side of me always says that, oh, this is an hype, but at the same time, we have been seeing that this technology is not new. They have been working on this, and then there were different cycles. And then it seems like, as you said, as from your experience, from my experience, and from the user's experience, it actually solves a lot of problems, and it provides convenience. So we might see big changes, but again, what I look at, Nevzat Hocam, is the nature of those changes. So will those changes, are those changes complementary, or will it cause what we call disruptive changes that would result in negative consequences for certain groups? And then we can look at it from the established, let's say, for institutions or universities, would it cause disruptive results, right? So one thing that our students come to us or come to our institutions is they have big questions. And somehow this regenerative AI, it has been trained in certain knowledge, right? And we also have to understand, let me try to answer that in a little bit, maybe from a wider perspective. We have to understand who is behind the ChatGPT or the GPT-4, right? It's the open.
Sorry to disturb you. Still, there's a human being behind this.
Actually, they cut that link. That's what I wanted to. That's what I want to mention. Maybe in the nature of the evolution of the technology, but there's a few things that I wanted to mention that might be concerning to us. So OpenAI started as a non-governmental organization movement. First backers were Sam Altman, Elon Musk. They pledged $1 billion each, $1 billion for the development of artificial intelligence that the open technologies that the OpenAI NGO, non-governmental organization, will be working on. 3 years later, Elon Musk left it, but continued supporting it. And OpenAI had always been an open, as the name indicates, open to researchers and practitioners. They were sharing most of their resources until a few years ago. And that's what I find concerning. They started a very close relationship with Microsoft as a big multinational company, right? Mm-hmm. And Microsoft actually in 2019 they secured an agreement and saying that the OpenAI technology will be using exclusively the Microsoft tools, background, storage. So all this data, it's very expensive, right, to actually generate. And then that's when I said, when they cut to human link. So that's the difference of the OpenAI's or the ChatGPT's background is it does not require you to constantly analyze billions of data. It's a pre-trained data. And actually, in order to, so there are two success factors. One is either you analyze billions of data constantly in order to bring those decisions, right? Those answers that we see in ChatGPT and GPT-4, or you create an algorithm that does not require constantly to search the data, right? So ChatGPT's approach is more on the second one. So they have a pre-trained data. They have been working on the first version. And then there, yes, there is humans involved because humans get there and then humans actually flag certain things. So humans are involved in certain decisions at the origin of this, what we call in the machine learning. But with the ChatGPT's technology is more about what we call regenerative learning or unsupervised learning, meaning that it doesn't require to look at the historical data anymore. The original training is there, but it keeps constantly updating it. How does it update it? That's maybe the biggest question. That's also more concerning for us. When you enter any kind of your academic or your academic research onto it, your email to ChatGPT, you actually train it. So when something is free, you are the customer or consumer, right? Okay. So it keeps constantly updating itself and getting personalized, customized information from you, from me, and it's storing it. So it does two things. One is it updates its learning. So you can see that it actually gets better when it gets to know you better, right? Yes. And you like it. So you provide more customized individual data with it. You share your emails, you share your updates, you share your academic papers, and then you ask questions, right? And then it learns more, and then it gives you better decisions. So one thing is it's concerning that it's going to know a lot about you. Number two, all this data runs on Microsoft servers, right? And then uses Microsoft technology and infrastructure. And so when are they going to commercialize it, right? And then how are they going to commercialize it? How about the cybersecurity of all that information we are sharing? So those are all big questions, maybe that's concerning from my perspective.
I understand. It's really it's interesting point that you have mentioned. Exactly what in my experience, and we are discuss also with students and some of our colleagues, they like it, but as you say, if one company like Microsoft is collecting all our data, that's will concern us, because it's exactly we like it because, as you say, the tool is going to know more about us. And yeah, we share even our emails and our papers. Then it's concerning because it's you don't want to know one company collect all your data, and then and do you think is also everything is connected to each other? Sometimes when we talk our friends, even we didn't research some product, but we talk between us, and immediately when we go to our social media, we see the product is
Correct.
it's and so all about things. My question now: do we need regulation for this?
That's actually coming back. I really like the cycle. We came back, and then so there's one thing I find positive about the difference between the European and maybe the American system is this is more concern for individuals' security and privacy, and Europe is much better in that, right? So in one side, yes, the startups, companies, they are saying that, oh, this is going to curtail innovation. Don't do that, don't do that. But at the same time, we are seeing that these are really big questions, and then the regulators need to step in, right? And Europe has been doing that sometimes at a at an extreme level, so that it scares away innovators, right? That's how we started our conversation. But the questions we are asking are so big. And then I think the regulators are seeing that from that perspective. They are saying that, okay, so how are we going to do that? And maybe the answer to that is it should be more self-regulating, right? So OpenAI has started like that. They said this technology. So this is the kind of contradiction that I want to take to the stress out. OpenAI started with the motto that if you are going to work on this AI technology, it should not be driven by big corporations. It should be open, right? They worked on that for 4 years, at least 4 years. And then when they came to a stage that they could actually commercialize all that research, then the companies jumped in, and Microsoft was the first to jump in. And then, so the contradiction there is now they are working exclusively with Microsoft, right? And it raises a lot of questions. And then, so how regulators will react to that, we will see. And then there needs to be, of course, some regulation around it. And so when I say self-regulation, self-regulation can come, from an ideal perspective, from the users. You and I, we become more conscious and then more self-aware of these facts of our individual data and privacy, so that we limit our usage, we limit our demand to these tools. So in return, companies come back and we choose companies who are transparent and then who follow all these maybe certain rules as customers and users, and then the companies come back and self-regulate themselves, right? But this is not seems to be happening at maybe the rate of this happening is not enough. So that's why I think the regulators jump in, right? They tell companies, hey, you have to be more careful about those. So we will see that happening for sure. Regulators will jump in.
Interesting. And well, again, I mean, the America, particularly Silicon Valley, has been always on the news about the entrepreneur, startup, innovation, and as you mentioned early, and everything we have not even imagined something like the Uber, or other big companies that has been using technology to renting car from Japan to Paris, from the California, or our houses, and it is, to be honestly, first, let's say when I was trying to rent my apartment in Paris, usually in a classic way, you could go to your neighborhood or the one company in Paris, you deal with him and he could help you find someone to rent your houses. But now it's, I don't want to mention their name, but a lot of companies now, you rent your houses, but you never meet them. And also everything seems come to with trust also. It is, but again, I mean, it's your private houses, someone between you and those who come to inside your house, and it's from San Francisco or somewhere else. And so it is, all these technologies, all this innovation, still, do you think, I am talking now in a sociological perspective, do we need the trust and ethic between humans? And or you think the technology will overcome and make everything in a technique based, do we really going to have as a human to our knowledge, our ethic, our attitude, or something will come in a world that everything will be with artificial intelligence, with robot? Or what do you think about the technological advance of the world today?
It's, as you said, it's a very big sociological and maybe philosophical question. I can only take a small bite on this. I see a lot of resemblance between the money and the money flow, as well as this technology adaptation and flow all over the world. And so money is fluid, right? So no matter what as governments do in terms of restricting the flow of money, they're not 100% successful. Money finds its way, right? So it's why we call it's fluid. And same thing with technology. If and the product of a technology solves the problem of the users, customers, consumers in a convenient and cheaper way, it's I think hard to limit what it can do, because it solves the real problem and it solves the problem in a convenient and cheaper and better way, right? So from that perspective, our hope is people like you, if they can educate the next generation with that strong foundation, so the tomorrow's change makers who are listening to today are our listeners, the future startup founders, the future innovators, right? Future leaders. That's our trust. Our hope is they start with those strong foundations about ethics, and then so they build up. Actually, they build companies or solutions that are for the good of society. And that's one hope. I think that's one hope we have about the future of the technology, right? And then there again, we can tie back to our discussion about regulation. Of course, if you let it all market thinking, then we'll see a lot of problems of this. So at one point, regulators or governments need to intervene. So the question is when. It's not about how, if. So we have seen if they don't intervene, there's so many issues, as we have seen in 2008 financial crisis, or even in the latest banking failures that we are seeing, right? And then the regulators should have put more oversight to maybe limit the damage of what happens later. So it's a combination of that. So I'm at one point I'm very optimistic, and as you can see from my perspective, I'm a very optimistic person. I'm an optimist. So I see the only reason that these technologies and the products take off is not because a big corporation is pushing them, right? Because if that were the case, then all of us would be using metaverse today, because Meta or Facebook has been spending billions of dollars to push this technology. But if does my thinking that if these technologies are not solving a real problem for us, then they are not going to take off, right? So so that's the optimist in me, thinking that with the new technologies and this new AI, maybe the ChatGPT tool or the GPT-4 technology, it actually solves problems in a way that it's a combination of us. It's easy, cheap, better, and then we feel safe as well. And so it's a combination of those things. And then so that's the optimist perspective I have about those.
So in fact, it's like the classic liberal capitalist perspective is like the supply is demand perspective. If we don't demand, then of course it will not take off and it will diminish. One more question. In fact, I have a lot of questions, but maybe we will do another meeting. I have really appreciated personally, and I hope many people are watching on YouTube. They are also appreciated. One more question for today. So we also, well, if you are in California, which is the center of the innovation and entrepreneurs, but we have also seen other countries, especially from developing countries like the Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, of course, China, Turkey. These countries, they are catching up the idea of what's happening in Silicon Valley, and also there we have seen a lot of news. And seems as we live in Europe, they are doing better than Europe for the moment. Especially, the maybe you know better than me. So do you think the competition between developing countries and in Silicon Valley, they are maybe copying the idea of what they are doing? What is really going on in the world, your perspective, that we are globalizing the idea of entrepreneurship, or these countries are more dynamic in terms of opening the new generation to push to this kind of innovation and startup? It's my concern. It's also seems the countries, they are also competing between themselves. And what do you think? The developing countries are doing well, or they just copy and paste?
They have been trying to do that for years and years at both Europe and developing countries. Russia have invested in billions of dollars to copy Silicon Valley, and then there is this famous story of them creating this enormous technology park for all these engineers in somewhere in Siberia, I guess, and it never took off, right? And we have seen many cases of that in Europe, right? And many cases of that all over the world. And so, but what happened in the last maybe 10 years is, I think this generation change. Number one, I think there was a generational change. Number two, that maybe specialized know-how that the US had and then especially what we had in the Silicon Valley, it became what we call in economic terms a commodity. It became available to everyone. So it's now actually you can Google it, you can ask ChatGPT how to start a startup. Exactly. Or if you're an investor, you would ask which company to invest, and then it can give you a very, very good decision. And then so that became commoditized. Also, what I see is the pie has grown. So it was a small local or US specific kind of an industry to look at, I think, the entrepreneurship, right? And then it became globalized. So it became a global product, meaning that all these regions, then we will see that in every country can have their own entrepreneurship innovation ecosystem, because it's a good ecosystem to have, because then you would have some money flowing in. You will have your it helps with your unemployment, right? It helps with your competitiveness of your country. So of course the governments will do everything to support that. So that's why we are seeing all these developing countries all over the world spending billions of dollars to, as you said, most of the time copy and paste. And when they copy and paste, they fail, but at least it sparks something in those locations. The question is whether what they do is effective and efficient. It's a completely different question, but some of those countries, as you said, indicated, Singapore and maybe Korea, South Korea, and they seem to be doing the right things, making the right decisions so that they become very competitive. Israel is another story. And then some of them are not making the right choices. And then Turkey is also, we can see they have done an enormous kind of job, very, very successful in attracting investment as well as creating in entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem in the last 10 years. Going back to your question, I think what I see is it's more now for our new generation, to our listeners. It's more about having the right mindset. If you have an entrepreneurial mindset, what we call entrepreneurial mindset, if you are driven by creating the world that you want to live in, now these borders, those regulations, those institutions, all of these things that we talk about does not matter, because they are digital nomads. They can work anywhere. Exactly. They can live anywhere. They can move anywhere, right? And then they can innovate and create new things anywhere. So I think that's the question. So it's more about, then it becomes a combination of, as you said, is it the right place to do that? So that would be more from the country's perspective to attract those talents, digital nomads, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I have a lot of questions, but I think we have done almost 1 hour. I have to thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Personally, I got amazing, lovely information, because it was not my field, and I always having this kind of question in my mind. And I hope we will do the second part if you have time. And thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to. I thank Paris Advanced Institute Research Institute for hosting this, and this was a great session and great questions always.
Thank you. It really was glad to have you.